And welcome everybody to another episode of Advocacy at Work. I am your host, Tim McDonald, and today I am honored to be joined by Andy Goodspeed. How you doing, Andy?
I'm doing good, Tim. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great, and we both know each other through, as you can see on Andy's background, Man Up to Cancer, which is a men's cancer support group. So if you're a man impacted by cancer, I think both of us, and I won't speak for you, but I'm sure you'll bring it up. I can't speak highly enough of the power of what the group does for all of us men, whether you're a patient, survivor, or a caregiver, helping us through the journey of not having to isolate through it. So I won't make this too much of a PSA, and they didn't pay me anything to say that. So, it's just how I believe. But Andy, why don't you just start off, tell us a little bit about your story and, how what happened to you, and then we'll dive in a little bit more to your advocacy journey.
Sure, yeah. I mean, first of all, let me say I think it's a travesty that you do not get paid for these PSA announcements about Man Up to Cancer. So we gotta talk to somebody about that for sure. But yeah, my story really, Tim, began back, I would say, in 2018. Used to do a lot of traveling with my wife. We have a YouTube channel that focuses on travel and our travel experiences. So it was one vacation. We were in Miami Beach, and I started noticing that I was having some severe symptoms of heartburn and stomach cramping, just general fatigue and exhaustion. I'd started having more severe back pains. I'd always had a little bit of back issues throughout my entire life, but they started getting a lot more severe, just shooting pain up and down my spine, and kind of was rotating towards the front of my chest as well. So I was in general just pain and knew that something wasn't right, but it was towards the end of 2018, and then 2019 rolled around, and being a man, of course, I kind of just dealt with the symptoms as best I could and ignored them, and chalked it up to getting old and working in the restaurant industry, which is where I basically come from as far as my career goes. 2020 rolled around, and obviously I had COVID, and my symptoms continued to get worse, and it was COVID. So I'm like, well, we're not going to the doctor now. So for about another year or so, I kind of pushed it to the back and dealt with it the best I could, using over-the-counter, Advil and drugs like that. I think I was keeping Imodium AD in stock in business. So finally, my wife, after lots of harassment, convinced me towards the end of COVID, in early 2021, I think it was February, I had to go and start seeing a doctor. I was originally misdiagnosed, and I won't even say misdiagnosed. I was diagnosed with a stomach angina, or not stomach angina, but heart angina, which I did have. But that's where the looking into my symptoms stopped. I went on to 3 different medications for my heart, and my symptoms didn't improve at all. If anything, they started continuing to get worse. I still had chest pains, I still had back pains, I still had stomach pains, and my fatigue was getting so bad that I was starting to fall asleep at work. And I worked at the pizza industry, in a restaurant, standing up. So standing up or falling asleep while you're standing up is usually a pretty big red flag, and for me, it obviously was. So back to the doctor, finally got some blood tests ordered, and they discovered that I was anemic. And that's when finally kind of the pieces of the puzzle started to fit together. They started to do more tests. I was scheduled pretty quickly for an endoscopy and colonoscopy as well. They did both of those tests. Colonoscopy came back great. Nothing wrong there. But unfortunately, in the endoscopy, they did find a large, almost 1-inch ulcer in my upper walls of the stomach. It had perforated through the walls. So at that point, they obviously sent it to the lab, and it came back as cancer positive. That was a shock, obviously, but not as big of a shock as in a couple of weeks later, after an MRI, it discovered that it was actually stage 4 cancer. Had it in 2 lymph nodes, and had it in my liver as well. And then I actually had it on about 90% of the surface of my bones, which was where all the pain was coming from. And I remember that first MRI, and I always compare it and tell people that if you look at a Christmas tree on Christmas morning, you see all those nice little presents and all those nice bright lights on the Christmas tree, and it's sparkly and it's magical. That's what I saw, but unfortunately it was on my MRI scan. And so now, as sad as it sounds, my joy of Christmas is not quite as what it used to be, because every time I see a Christmas tree, it takes me back to that day where I saw that first scan. And I remember myself crying. I remember my wife crying. I remember the nurse trying not to cry, but you could see the tears in her eyes. And it was just, it was an out-of-body experience. And that's kind of how it all happened and how it all came together. I probably ignored the symptoms for 3 years. When I finally got to a doctor, it was not misdiagnosed, but it was, diagnosed later than it probably should have been. They focused on everything but cancer first, which was a problem, obviously. And so that's how I kind of got into the advocacy thing. Finally, after about, I think it was 2.5 years of chemo and immunotherapy, miraculously, after only been given 6 months to live, I survived, and I was declared to have no evidence of disease in August of 2023. It was news that I always felt I wasn't supposed to get. I wasn't prepared for it. I had spent a couple of years basically preparing to die, and trying to get all my affairs together and make sure my wife was taken care of. And then lo and behold, I had the best surprise of my life and was told that, I no longer had any evidence of disease, which, as we can both attest to, I think is a whole another battle after that. So survivorship is a battle in itself. And that's kind of how I became involved in this advocacy work. So.
Yeah, well, before we jump into that next chapter of advocacy, I always like to just set the baseline of how you define advocacy. So how would you define advocacy?
For me, what advocacy means is helping others through their journey that I had, but try to make it better for them than what it was for me. If I can do something to prepare people better for the side effects of maybe treatments, if I can convince people to go in and get endoscopies, more frequently, or colonoscopies, or both, just things like that. Because I am definitely guilty of ignoring symptoms for multiple years that, if I had not ignored them at the beginning, I probably would have been diagnosed at stage 1, and it would have not been, as brutal of a journey as it was for me. And I look back at all the mistakes that I made, and I try to make sure through my advocacy that those mistakes aren't made by others.
Yeah, no, and I think that's so important. And I was listening to your story. Mine wasn't quite as extended as yours as far as before I went to the doctor, but definitely things like, strange back pains. I personally had night sweats. I got cold during the day, even though I live in Tampa, Florida.
Yeah, it's hard to do. Yep.
All those types of things were just, nothing that I associated with cancer, but they were all probably stemming from the fact that cancer was growing inside of my body. So,
and looking back now, that was the same thing. I mean, you never correlate that stuff to cancer. I mean, everybody has stomach cramps from time to time. Even when they're severe, it's like, okay, that must have been something I ate or what have you. I grew up with a history of heartburn throughout my entire life, pretty much. I mean, I remember taking heartburn medication when I was in high school, so I didn't think anything of it. I just thought, well, it's the same old. And I think it was probably the fatigue that really clued me in, because I'd never been that tired in my life, and I just kept getting more tired, and that's when I'm like, well, something is going on here. Obviously, the doctors didn't suspect cancer, neither did I, and it ended up, being cancer. So.
Being cancer, yeah. So as we talk about your advocacy, I know you mentioned a little bit about sharing your story and trying to help others, which I absolutely love. I mean, that's kind of how I look at it too. It's like there's one thing about advocating for yourself, but then there's another thing when you take that and try and help others through this mission. So tell me what your advocacy, really, from the time, first, I guess, I'm curious, what kind of made you, was there something that happened that made you think, I really need to start sharing my story so that others won't have to, that can navigate through this or won't have to go through what I'm going through?
Yeah. Well, it all goes back to what I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, and that's the survivorship piece of it. When I got the news that I was, NED for the first month or so, I was just on top of the world, not thinking about anything except that I was still alive and happier than a clam. And then after that first month, as I've told people before, all those phone calls stop, all the people that were checking in on you when you had cancer, that all stops, and suddenly you feel very isolated. Survivorship, as happy as it can also be extremely isolating and depressing. And I think in that moment, I didn't know what I was going to do with the rest of my life, and I didn't have any plans because I didn't plan on being alive still. And I kind of just looked in the mirror and said, you can't waste this opportunity. You can't sit on your ass and your sofa and, watch guys' grocery games all day long. You got to do something with a second opportunity. You owe it to everybody to do something with your survivorship. And that's Kind of where it started. I went to a stomach cancer conference in Washington, D.C. for my first advocacy event. That was in 2023. Didn't really plan on doing anything beyond that one conference. I was invited to it through the Hope for Stomach Cancer organization. It was all expense paid. I thought, well, this would be nice. I'd go learn a little bit about, the advances in treatments and things like that, and call it a day. And, I'll do a little bit of advocacy on Capitol Hill. It's not something I was really interested in per se. But the more I went through those 3 days there, the more I realized how important it was to advocate. And I think that's kind of when it started. I did it with a couple of people that had done it before. We met with some senators and their staff and things like that. And it was a very interesting time for sure. And I think, just based on that one experience, it made me want to continue to do it. Because the first year, I will admit that we got probably literally nothing accomplished, and it kind of set a fire under me. It's like, we got to keep pushing these people, these senators and these Congress people, to get better research and better funding and things like that. So I think that's when it started, was just that Hope for Stomach Cancer conference back in 2023.
And I'm always curious because I know you said you were invited by them. Were you already part of their group, or just on their email list? Or?
Early on in my diagnosis, I had the same problem that I think probably most cancer patients have, and that is where to find resources. We are all guilty of using Google as our resource, and Google is one of the worst resources. I think we can also all admit. A lot of the facts and figures that you find on Google are completely outdated. So I was the first 9 months, I didn't really want to do anything or deal with my cancer. Thankfully, I have a wife that was an amazing caretaker that actually works in the medical field as well. So she understood a lot of that stuff. So she was kind of the one that signed me up for Hope for Stomach Cancer. She signed herself up as well. And it was through that we started meeting different people, talking about our experience and learning that, a lot of people had the same experiences that I did. And so that's kind of how I got involved with that group. And through that group, I got involved in Man Up to Cancer. I got involved in Debbie's Dream Foundation as well, which is another stomach cancer organization. So Hope for Stomach Cancer, I give credit for opening up a lot of doors for me as far as my advocacy journey goes.
Yeah, no, I always like that, because I think one of the biggest questions I get from a lot of people that are first starting is like, how do I get started? Yeah. And yours was actually kind of initiated by your wife, it sounds like, but then it was I got involved. Yeah. It like kind of just, all you did was show up in there and start participating, it sounded like, and then got the offer, right?
Basically, yeah. I mean, I won't say I'm a social media addict, but I'm a social media addict basically. So once I got involved in the group on Facebook, I did a lot of comments and things like that in the group. And so I became one of their, top contributors, as Facebook likes to tell you. And from that point, I became well known within the group, and they did a video on me that's on YouTube now as well about my journey. And from there, they invited me to go to Washington, D.C. with them. Now on their Speakers Bureau, which is a national group of about 20 of us that do media events and things like that. So, it's a great group, and I'm glad I found them, and I was able to start my advocacy journey there.
That's fantastic. So since you did that in 23, I know you mentioned you keep going back, but how has your kind of advocacy evolved since that first DC trip to the Hill?
Well, I'm a lot better at it. I remember that. I remember that first trip. I was definitely a deer in headlights, running from Congress building to Congress building and trying to find my way around. And it was very intimidating. You're in front of these people that you see on TV, you see on CNN and C-SPAN. And, sometimes you'll pass them in the hallway, and Capitol Hill is a very intimidating place. Once you're there, I mean, the Capitol is huge in itself, and all the history and stuff like that. So I was very overwhelmed on that first conference and that first advocacy day. But I think that was what, like I said, opened the door to me. I met Joe Bullock at that first conference, which is how I got involved in Man Up to Cancer. And so I just started after that first time to kind of practice my public speaking a little bit, and just kind of learn the in and outs of advocacy. So when I went back and did it a second time, I could actually speak up a little bit and talk about my story a little bit better and make more of an impact. So I think as far as my advocacy journey goes, it's pretty simple. Just practice, and you get better as you do it, and you get more comfortable as you do it, like anything, and hopefully it becomes second nature, and you can kind of make an impact.
No, I absolutely love it because it wasn't something you set out to do. It just kind of
Yeah,
naturally evolved. And
I don't want to say I have a dislike of most of the public, but I have a dislike of most of the public. So public speaking for me is not something I was ever really cared to do. But the more I do it, the more I find myself actually connecting with people. And I think it's been great in that respect because it's brought me also out of my shell. I could easily be a hermit, but because of the advocacy work, I'm forced to kind of, get out of my comfort zone, you might say, and talk to these senators and their staff members and, get out in front of groups of people and do talks and things like that. So I think it's definitely brought a part of me out that I enjoy and that I'm proud of, but I'd rather not do it at the same time. But it's something that I feel like I should do because like I said earlier, I had that second chance and that survivorship. And the one thing I don't want to do is waste it.
no, I think that's so powerful. And I love your message about like, this isn't something that you are necessarily comfortable with,
Right.
but you just feel compelled to do it. And you put in the time and the effort to make it where you get better and better at it.
Right.
So
Exactly.
it's like, we don't need to, I always say that about research advocacy that I'm involved with, as well as legislative, that, I first stayed away from it because I didn't think, I don't have any research background. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor. And then it was like, I got into it and I'm like, wait a minute, I don't need to know any of that.
Well, I mean, and similar to you, the more I've learned about it, it's like actually the best advocates are people that are not medical people. They're the everyday people like you and I. We're the ones that'll make that impact. I mean, these senators talk to people with numbers and facts and figures all the time, but it's those personal stories that can actually get out and reach these, senators and these people. It's the personal stories of struggle and survivorship, and that's the one that really gets their ear.
Yes. No, I think that's so important to, for people to understand is, and I think you put that so beautifully as far as like the aspect of, I know all these organizations are sending them reports, data, everything all the time. But when we show up as patients, that's what our job is, even though we're given all this literature that has all those data and all that, those reports. It's like, we don't talk about that stuff. We just talk about our stories and then hand them that and let them
exactly. They can read the figures on their own.
Yep. So, well, why don't we take a little break? And I got 4 questions that are just kind of fun, get to know you a little bit better. So the first one is, what is your favorite color?
My favorite color? That's a great question. I'd say black. Yeah, and no particular reason except I have a dark sense of humor. I'm a bit moody at times, and black is thinning. So there we go. Those 3 reasons.
All right. And who is your favorite band or musician?
That's a tough one. I have a very eclectic mix of music. Let's put it that way. If you go to my Spotify list, it goes anywhere from rap music to country music to classical. So, but overall favorite bands, I used to really love Def Leppard growing up. When I was in high school, those used to be my go-to. Since then, my metalhead days are a little bit over. So now it's more of the softer side of things. But band-wise, I don't really have a favorite band. I'd say as far as singers go, I really enjoy Lionel Richie. Like I said, a far cry from Def Leppard. Colby Calais is another one. I also like more independent artists like Joshua Radin. Lately, I've been listening to a lot of Shinedown. So yeah, it goes from one end of the spectrum to the other for sure.
I love it. And I always learn new musicians and bands through asking this question. So, and what is one place that you've always wanted to visit? I know you said your wife and I, or your wife and I, your wife and you.
What have you been doing with my wife?
I don't think she's done anything with me yet.
All right.
But what's one place that you guys have always wanted to go but haven't been to yet?
She's always mentioned Australia, so I would say probably Australia. Italy was actually our chosen vacation before I got cancer. We were had Italy all lined up. We were within 2 weeks of leaving for Italy. And then COVID hit and our flights got canceled. And I said, well, as soon as COVID's done, we'll go to Italy. But as soon as COVID got over, I got cancer. So that got delayed again. So we waited about 5 years to go to Italy, and we finally did. And that was my bucket list place. But hers is Australia. So we may end up in Australia here in the next few years as well.
Sounds good. And finally, for my final question about on this little part is, what is one thing that most people do not know about you?
Most people do not know about me. That's a good question. I'm a big sap guy, I guess you might say. So I like chick flicks. I like girl drinks. I scrapbook from time to time for my parents. Every Christmas, I make them a scrapbook. It used to be by hand, which was really tough, but now it's by a Shutterfly or something like that. But so yeah, I would say I'm an emotional guy, even though on the outside I tend just to be kind of not approachable and angry, I guess my wife tells me. But yeah, I'm a big softy on the inside. How's that?
I love it. I love it. So I know with your advocacy and you go to the Hill, you're obviously having asks. If we looked at, what's most important out of those asks to you personally, what would that be?
Probably the same ask that we've been asking Congress now for a couple of years, and that's the Early Prevention or Stomach Cancer Early Prevention and Detection Act, simply because that's what matters most to me, because that was what my situation was, is that I did not have any form of really early detection. As we discussed off camera, stomach cancer does not have any guidelines as far as early detection goes. You got, colorectal cancer that has the colonoscopies every, I think, 3 years it is. Breast cancer with the mammograms are mandatory as far as the healthcare world goes. So things like that. So what I'd like to see is, a mandatory endoscopy for stomach cancer, every 3 years, like you do with colon cancer, as far as your colonoscopies go. So if we could get some federal mandates, such as those things, I think it could cure or prevent a lot of the cancer situations. Another thing a lot of people don't know about stomach cancer is H. pylori is actually a precursor for stomach cancer. And H. pylori is actually a disease that you can get at any time during your lifetime. But it's most prevalent overseas because of the chemicals that are in foreign countries and wars. A lot of our military veterans come back from foreign wars with H. pylori because they've been exposed to these different chemicals. And H. pylori is literally just a virus. So it's kind of like your flu virus or your COVID virus. If you detect it, you can go to Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, and get a simple medicine for it, and it's cured in a week. But if it goes undetected and you never know you had it, then it stays inside your body, and it eventually, I think its last count was at least 80% of patients that had H. pylori could potentially get stomach cancer later on in life. So it's just things like that the medical world, unfortunately, right now does not have any guidelines to look at. So,
wow. That's you just educated me on something. So this is why I love getting out of the colorectal cancer space and talking with other people in different disease areas, because I learn from them. Andy, we're kind of at the end here, but what if people want to learn more about you or connect with you, where can they go? And if it's not to you personally, like organizations where you're at, just anything you want to share with people as far as resources or connection points.
Yeah, like I said, I'm a member of Hope for Stomach Cancer, which is stocan.org. So if they want to go to Hope for Stomach Cancer, and they can research that, look at that, and it'll tell you everything you ever want to know about stomach cancer. You can reach me through that avenue, Debbie's Dream Foundation, and obviously Man Up to Cancer. So andy.goodspeed@manuptocancer.org would be the easiest way to reach out to me. Obviously, if you're already part of the Man Up to Cancer group, then you can find me on the Circle app that we all love. And those are the easiest ways. I'm also on YouTube. I have my own YouTube page. It's goodtimesproductions.com or .com, but Good Times Productions, I should say, on YouTube. And those are the easiest ways. Facebook Messenger always works out pretty good. And I have people that reach out to me often, so I do enjoy that part. I like helping people in their different situations and helping them with their cancer journeys, and hopefully, making it a little bit easier for them. And I love to hear their stories, especially, their success stories for sure. So
I love that. I have not met an advocate yet who doesn't like the one-on-one connections with
and that's
other
the easy.
patients.
I mean, those are the easiest connections, where you're sitting there watching TV at 8:30 at night, and all of a sudden you get a random message from somebody, from the Hope for Stomach Cancer organization that, has a couple of questions about your journey and about their journey. And, it's fulfilling, it's just knowing that you've helped somebody, make it through the day and have their best day possible. It's very fulfilling. And it's easy, it's easy to answer a question on Facebook. It doesn't take much time, and, and that's how you make connections too. I mean, I've made lifelong friends just by Facebook Messenger. You talk to these people over Messenger, you go to these conferences in DC, these advocacy weekends, and you can put the face with the online messages, and, you've made lifelong friends then. So it's like, hey, I remember talking to you on Facebook and that kind of thing. So cancer has opened up a lot of doors for me. It's changed who I am, and both in good and bad ways, obviously. But there's a lot of, and it sounds weird, but there's a lot of positives that go along with a cancer diagnosis, along with the negatives, obviously. But it's the positives that I try to choose to focus on. I wouldn't have met all of these great people on Man Up to Cancer and Hope for Stomach Cancer if I didn't have cancer to start with, and I wouldn't be doing this work if I never had cancer. I'd still be working in the restaurant industry and probably complaining that my feet hurt and complaining about the customers and things like this. So, this is very fulfilling. It's rewarding, and I encourage people, to experience and to try out a little bit of advocacy. I think, a lot of people that are uncomfortable talking, in the end would find it pretty enjoyable like I did. So.
No, thank you so much, Andy. And for you listening, don't forget to subscribe to advocacyatwork.com. It will get you all the podcasts that we release each week, any blog posts that we put up, and a new series called This Week in Advocacy, where we feature 3 advocates. And that's how I actually invited Andy to be on, was when I featured him, because I saw him on a local news article talking about stomach cancer. So one of those advocacy moments that he just shared earlier. So please visit advocacyatwork.com and just enter your email address and subscribe. And we will see you next week on Advocacy at Work.
Thanks, Tim.